YTBC, this is Perfect P234. Just about an hour or two ago on one of my breaks, I was able to listen to Zone 6 response video to me about the top 5 greatest welterweights of all time that we agreed on, and some that we disagreed on. Really good list, man. I had, it caused me to think a little bit more. Like I was considering some of those guys to be on the list, but I thought that Leonard and Hearns and Pryor had a little more prestige. But I thought about Julio Cesar Chavez, and I don't know why I didn't pick him. I thought that was a little too obvious to an extent. And at the same time, I kind of relate to Pryor. We have a similar, frame and build. I know he had, sorry about that. I know he had problems outside of the ring, but he was undefeated as a light welterweight, and his only loss was at 147 when he came out of retirement to Bobby Joe. But he only had, 11 title defenses, while Julio Cesar Chavez was involved in, he had 11 title fights. Julio Cesar Chavez, just at, light welterweight, was involved in 24 welterweight title fights and light welterweight title fights. So, yeah, I would have to change out Pryor for him. As far as Trinidad and De La Hoya, I was looking at Trinidad, a little deeper too, and he had a good situation. He actually entered the championship realm a lot sooner than Hearns and Leonard. And it was a little bit of different time then. They had to fight for those the national titles, and then they had to get it. Then they got their shot at the world titles and all. But even with that, there still was a bit of a gap. I think Tito got his first title shot with his 20th fight, where these guys, they got their national title shots at like 24, 25 fights, something like that. But yeah, Tito did have a lot more title defenses, title fights at welterweight. He has 16 total versus Hearns and Leonard. So I could see how, maybe taking out Hearns in place of Felix Trinidad, because after his fight with Leonard, he didn't stick around. He moved up in weight, so he only had 32 fights at welterweight. Tito had 35 fights at welterweight, and you're right, he was undefeated at welterweight, and he did, he did his thing. I just think Hearns is just special, man. He's just a freak of nature. I was thinking about it in terms of who I thought might beat who to an extent, and also, the number of fights that they had, and, different things like that. That's partially what was going into my, why I picked who I picked. Of course, Homicide Hank, Henry Armstrong, fighting and defending the featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight titles all at the same time. I mean, and fighting Sugar Ray Robinson and fighting, all of them guys back then, definitely sits among the top, just overall best fighters of all time, and not to mention, welterweight and all. But yeah, so as far as Oscar De La Hoya, I don't know if I could put Oscar over Leonard, because, Oscar started his career at 130, and he had, I think Leonard had more title fights than Oscar did, And Leonard did unify the belts at 147, like, you know, Tito unified the belts at 147. So I'm gonna have to keep Leonard in there in place of Oscar. And then, of course, you know, Oscar moved up, he did his stuff, but he did start at the lower weight. So he had a couple of fights. Like, if you combine his light welterweight title fights and his welterweight title fights, I think Leonard still, let me see, Leonard started 24, and I think he wound up leaving. He had one more fight after Hearns at welterweight, so I think that was his 33rd fight. So he had about 9 or 10. I gotta count it again. But I do think he outnumbered Tito, and I'm not Tito, Oscar, and he did unify the title in a 15-round fight, which, in that fight, you know, that fight there shows the significance of, you know, 15 rounds, because if it was just 12, he would have lost that fight, you know. So those extra 2 rounds helped him out. I mean, because Hearns was coming back strong. You know, it was a back and forth fight. That was a really good fight, and Hearns is just difficult for pretty much anybody, you know. But yeah, that was a good list. I was talking to this guy at my job. He was talking about Hagler and how he was so much tougher because he had the fight in those 15 rounders. And I counted him up for him. I was like, he fought, you know, 9 that were scheduled for 15, but he got most of them out of there. And there was only one fighter who ever went 15 rounds with him. And that was Roberto Duran. And I was like, yo, Roberto Duran is great, because he came all the way from 122, you know, all the way down there, I think. If I'm not mistaken, he might have been a little lighter, coming from lighter, but yeah, I mean, to go 15 rounds with Hagler, to be the only man to ever do that, that's a feat, you know. That is definitely a feat in and of itself. But so yeah, so what I did, I showed him, you know, that of the 9 fights that were scheduled for 15, you know, 6 of them didn't go past 12, and of the 3 that did go past 12, only one of them actually went 15. So, but I was just saying, like, it's not really a fair comparison, like, well, and yeah, and you're right, you know, the 15 and the 12. I think even with the 15 rounders, it was a part of the guy's strategies too, because I was doing a comparison to, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ray Leonard, when I was looking at his 15 rounders, and I was comparing it to Floyd's 12 rounders and the number of knockouts versus the number that went to distance or went past 12. It was similar ratio, like, so, you know, different fighters and different styles. Thomas Hearns at welterweight, he was you know, he was 32-0 with 30 knockouts when he fought Leonard, suffered his first loss. I mean, so that was some of the other factors too that went into why I had Hearns on there. He was just a monster, and the time was a little different. It wasn't quite as easy to get a belt. I mean, you couldn't, you know, pick up a strap that early as Tito did, or I don't want to say couldn't, but it wasn't common, at least not at, you know, at welterweight. So, you know, some of that went into play too, but yeah, I could see taking out Hearns and putting Tito there, and I don't know if I could change out Oscar for Leonard, but yeah, and definitely you can't take anything away from these guys who did fight 15 rounds, who had to have the mentality of knowing and training to go 15 rounds, and you know, stuff like that. So definitely that there. So I mean, I didn't have time to look up the other videos. I only get these 15-minute breaks, and I'm headed to my second job now after leaving this one. So I'm gonna try to listen to your welterweight all-time list on the way, in the car on the way. So I'll upload this, and look forward to your. Maybe we can talk about, you know, if you between Oscar and